Is the private sector capable of doing what we need? If it is, let's see about using it. I'm open to that. Even as a critic of the private sector, show me that the private sector can handle a problem in the way we need. I'm open to working something out with the private sector. But if I can show you that the private sector is failing to do it, then you have to give me the equal opportunity to say, okay, here's a role for some collective, some public, some governmental activity. And either you have health insurance or you don't. This is not rocket science. Either we say to our people, as many countries do, if you get injured or if you get an illness, we will not hold you responsible. It's not the way we think. That is a social problem, like having clean air or clean water or a public school system or a park in which to play with your children, whatever. The private sector can't do it. The headlines today are to justify what the Republicans are doing, that the insurance companies that are still involved in ACA can't make a lot of money and their stock prices have gone down recently. True enough. But the way to understand that is you can't do what we need to do for sick people as a decent human community under a private system. Doesn't work. It's amazing that this country is still the laggard among industrial advanced economies. And by the way, quite a few very poor economies give their people, like Cuba, but not just left-wing governments like that, but middle of the road and nondescript political governments believe that it's a right that they cannot refuse their people, that the government must, either alone or in partnership of some kind with private interests, it must provide medical care at an affordable cost or subsidized to its people, that it is immoral not to do it. It is as normal and routine as, Americans take for granted that the public funds elementary schools or high schools or public parks or a whole lot of other things that we consume collectively, that healthcare ought to be among them. And we don't do it in this country. We have an ideological block, a commitment to private enterprise, no matter the disaster that it produces. And the reality is, as people have known for centuries, if you don't take care of everybody's health, you will regret it. And the reason is simple. We're too close to one another. We get together in the same bus or the same subway or in the same restaurant or in the same movie theater or wherever it is, we spend our lives. And if we don't take care of one another, we will infect one another with whatever it is. If you take away health insurance, which is what ACA was designed to do, then we know what the result is. You are telling people this is going to cost you what you can't afford. And you know what people will do in the millions? They will avoid, they will minimize, they will postpone seeing a doctor, getting medical attention. That will make their condition in all likelihood worse, and on and on and on. This is another example of a system breaking down and in the course of doing it, literally shooting itself in the foot. Self-destruction is what we are watching. And the absurd notion by some Republicans, as you just told us, that according to Speaker Johnson, they don't have an appetite to... What are you talking about? That's like saying I don't have an appetite to take care of myself physically and mentally, so I'm deteriorating, and saying, I don't have an appetite to take care of myself. Well, then your problems are much worse than you seem to understand. By the very ability to talk like that, you don't get what the issue is. In the end, this is all crazy. Why do we have private insurance, public insurance? You know what that is? Two sets of record keepers, two computers, two paid people to hassle with the doctor over the payment, or to hassle with you, or to hassle with the hospital. There's an army of people spending their lives doing nothing other than holding together this sort of jerry-rigged contraption, a Rube Goldberg way of doing something that we used to make fun of. Why are we doing this? And the answer is the private profit, which is hidden behind all of these mechanisms, keeps it all going because they walk away with the money. But again, the people who run the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals, that's the employer class. And I want to remind everyone, the US Census tells us 3% of Americans are employers. The rest of us aren't. Employers are interested in profits. The rest of us are interested in wages and salaries and whatever other income we can generate. But we have a system focused on what is the interest of the 3%, not the interest of the 97. If the interest of the 97 were to prevail, you'd give a reasonable return to the people at the top for their profit. And I'll give you an example in a moment of how that works. But that would be the afterthought. Give them a reasonable return, but the most important thing is make healthcare affordable for everybody else, for the average person. And I'm going to give you the two examples, insurance and public utilities. We went through it in this country. Insurance companies, general insurance companies, kind of stranglehold, and they jacked up the premiums until everybody complained. And the same thing happened with public utilities, electric companies, telephone and so every one of the 50 states, everyone has an insurance commission and a utility commission to make those industries prove to public officials that they're entitled to a reasonable profit and can't take their prices above. They have to get permission to raise the prices. Why don't we do that for the whole society? The same logic applies, whether you're selling coffee in the morning or you're selling electricity in the plug in the side of your house. We seem in some places to recognize the point, but in other places, the folks earning profit have literally pulled the wool down over everyone's eyes, and we are told we have the greatest medical system in the world. No, we don't. Look, I can tell you about my students who go back to the countries they come from, not because they want to, not because they're getting married, but because they want health insurance, and they can't get it here. That's how important this has become. And we're losing some of the best minds we have because we seem unable to recognize that some things are not handled effectively by private profiteers. And the latest stuff, there's an element of this, Brian, that, my morality gets offended. The losers in this game are the people stuck, if they're an insurance company, with the pool of people who need it the most. That is the sickest people amongst us, those with a cancer, those with serious medical problems. We pride ourselves on being moral, being a Christian, however we phrase it. What kind of religious commitment do you have if you want to take medical care away from the sickest people? There for that sick person, there goes your mother or your father or your child or your spouse. Come on, what what elemental distortion could explain the behavior of Mr. Johnson in Washington? Pathetic is another word for it. A last thing, I tell this story sometime. A few years ago, I was a visiting professor at the University of Paris in France. And if you do that, I won't bore you with the details, you have to go on to the National Health Service as a public employee because the universities there are all public. They don't give the private sector a chance to have a university. By the way, when you ask them, they will tell you that creates a two-class system. Private schools for the rich and then public schools for everybody else. And we won't have that. That's contradictory to democracy. So when I took a job as a professor for a while, I went on the public role because I'm a public employee. That automatically gave me a medical care card as part of their national medical health system, which they proudly refer to as socialized medicine. When I got sick, I took my card, went to a doctor, and got treated. No clerk, no secretary, no mountain of paperwork, no insurance company. It's all computerized, everything, and there's no money. There's a withholding out of your check, the way we do Social Security in this country, and that takes care of the doctors who are all on salary, paid by the government to be doctors. They are allowed to have a private practice if they want one for rich people, if they're there. But most people don't bother. They use the pub, as I did, very well taken care of, no issue, and no money. I had something was taken out of my paycheck, but I was happy to know that I had no medical concern. If I got hurt, if I fell down, if I got sick, I would be taken care of. And my French family, my father was born in France, my French family just takes all of that for granted and has all its life. For example, when I said I'm worried if I get sick, who will take care? I'm married, I have 2 children. Who's going to take care of all of that? And they smiled and said, we haven't had that for 40 years in this country. Nobody worries about that because you can't be bankrupt by your medical condition.